نحمد ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله. Today inshallah we'll be starting from verse number 6 of Surah Al-Ahzab. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم وأزواجه أمهاتهم وأولو الأرحام بعضهم أولى ببعض في كتاب الله من المؤمنين والمهاجرين إلا أن تفعلوا إلى أوليائكم معروفا كان ذلك في الكتاب مسطورا. The Prophet is more worthy of the believers than themselves, and his wives are in the position of their mothers. And those of blood relationship are more entitled to inheritance in the book of Allah than the other believers and the immigrants, except that you do some good to your friend through a will in their favor. This has been written in the book, the preserved tablet. So mastura means muqaddaran maktuban, predestined, written. There are four concepts described in this verse. First one, An-Nabiyyu awla bil mu'minina min anfusihim. First is that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is more close and dear to a Muslim than even his own self. And this sets a very fundamental stipulation for every Muslim to follow the commands of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam over his desires, over his own whims and intellect. When we look at our situation today, can we really say that we love Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam more than even ourselves? It is one thing to claim the love of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, but it is truly through our actions that we can justify our claim. For example, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Man ghasha falaysa minna." Whoever cheats, he is not one of us. And yet we see cheating in buying and selling goods in bazaar today. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Kafa bil mar'i kadiban an yuhadditha bikulli ma sami'a." It is enough of a lie for a man that he narrates everything he hears. And we find people sharing whatever they receive on social media without confirming its validity. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also said, "Kullul muslima ala al-muslimi haramun damuhu wa maluhu wa irduhu." All things of a Muslim are inviolable for his brother in faith, his blood, his wealth, and his honor. But unfortunately, there is news of looting, killing, and defamation every day in our communities. So claiming love of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in our conversations and singing naats and nasheeds is not enough. We have to change our behavior and follow Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the way he interacted with others in all matters. Narrated by Anas bin Malik radhiyallahu anhu, Muslim, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta akuna ahabba ilayhi min waladihi wa walidihi wan nasi ajma'in." None of you is a believer until I am dearer to him than his child, his father, and the whole mankind. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the clear understanding of what it means to love his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then allow us to reflect this love through our actions in our daily lives. Ameen. Coming back to the verse, the second concept mentioned here is وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُهُ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ, meaning the wives of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are like your mothers in terms of honor and respect. And then later on in verse 53, it becomes even more clear when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids any Muslim to marry any of the wives of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The third concept in this verse is وَأُولُو الْأَحْرَامِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلَى بِبَعْضٍ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُهَاجِرِينَ. The scholars say that the word mu'mineen here is referring to Ansar, and Muhajirin were the immigrants. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had established mu'akhat, brotherhood among Muhajirin and Ansar in Medina. It was so strong that they used to inherit from each other even though they were not related by blood. This verse is abrogating the ruling of inheritance that was established based on the mu'akhat. Rather, going forward, inheritance should be based on blood relationships only. And then the fourth concept, إِلَّا أَن تَفْعَلُوا إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِكُمْ مَعْرُوفًا. Even though inheritance is based on blood relationships only, it is not forbidden to leave a will for a fellow believer, someone who is not in your ears. During your lifetime, you can give gifts to them, or even leave a will for 1/3 of your wealth to be given to them after your death. So that is still acceptable. وَإِذَا أَخَذْنَا مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ مِيثَاقَهُمْ وَمِنكَ وَمِن نُوحٍ وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمُوسَى وَعِيسَى ابْنِ مَرْيَمَ وَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُم مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. And mention of Muhammad, when you took from the prophets their covenant, and from you and from Nuh and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa the son of Maryam, and we took from them a solemn covenant. ميثاقهم means al-ahd al-mu'akkad bi-tabligh al-risala, the firm covenant to convey the message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took a pledge from all prophets while their souls were still in eternity, alimul arwah. This verse mentions a covenant taken from prophets in eternity at the same time that the pledge of Alastu bi Rabbikum was taken by the entire mankind at large. But what was this pledge about? It was to perform the duties of prophethood and to attest to the authenticity of each other. Notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first mentions prophets in general and then names 5 Ulul Azm prophets, starting with Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But you may wonder why Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was mentioned first, even though other prophets, Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam, they were named in the chronological order. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah states that it is due to the honor of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And Imam Baghawi and some other scholars explain it by referencing a hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam reportedly said, "Kuntu awwal al-anbiya'i fil khalqi wa akhirahum fil ba'thi." I was the first of prophets to be created and the last of them to be sent. And Allah knows best. لِيَسْأَلَ الصَّادِقِينَ عَنْ صِدْقِهِمْ وَأَعَدَّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا أَلِيمًا. That he may question the truthful about their truth, and he has prepared for the disbelievers a painful punishment. There are many interpretations on who are referred to as Sadiqeen in this verse. One opinion is that prophets will be asked about whether they delivered the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as commanded. Another opinion is that prophets will be asked about how did their nations responded to the message. A third opinion is that the people who believed in the prophets, they will be asked about their duty to spread the message further. And Allah knows best. Let's quickly review the summary of verses 6 to 8. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam should be dearer to believers than everything else in this world, even their own lives. And the wives of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam are spiritual mothers of all believers. Inheritance should be based on blood relationships, not on any other terms like brotherhood that was established in Medina between Ansar and Muhajirin. And it is acceptable to leave a will for non-heirs up to 1/3 of one's wealth. And finally, that all prophets pledged in eternity, alimul arwah, to dutifully spread the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ جاءتكم جنود فأرسلنا عليهم ريحا وجنودا لم تروها وكان الله بما تعملون بصيرا. O you who have believed, remember the favor of Allah upon you when armies came to attack you. And we sent upon them a wind and armies of angels you did not see. And ever is Allah of what you do seeing. Junudun means Al-Ahzab حين اجتمعوا في غزوة الخندق, meaning the army is groups of disbelievers when they gather for the battle of the trench. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds believers of his favor in this verse and the support he gave during the battle of Ahzab when Muslims were besieged. They were surrounded for almost a month by one of the largest armies of disbelievers, and there was no end in sight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends gusts of cold wind such that their tents flew away and they could not even light any fire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also sent angels who put fear in the heart of disbelievers, and they retreated from the battleground to save themselves. From this verse onwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes a few events related to the Battle of the Trench. So let's go through some background of this battle. In Shawwal of 5th Hijrah, disbelievers joined forces and became the biggest army to fight against Muslims. These included the Quraysh of Makkah, the surrounding tribes of Ghatfan, and the Jews of Medina like Banu Nadir, who were banished to Al-Khaybar by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam outside of Medina. So a total of almost 12 to 15,000 disbelievers got together and made a confederation. And in comparison, the Muslims in Medina were roughly 3,000 in number. So the army was about 5 times more than the strength of the Muslims. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam consulted with Sahaba on the war strategy for this situation. There were many ideas presented, but Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam liked the suggestion of Salman al-Farsi, which was to block the army from reaching Medina by building a trench. And it is important to understand the geography of Medina to appreciate how this was a smart strategy. Medina was surrounded by rocky mountains and trees, except from the north, behind the Mount of Sana. So if Muslims were to dig a trench on this passage, it would block the armies from entering into the city. Now, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself made a marking on the ground to indicate where this trench should be dug. It was meant to be 5 kilometers long, about 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep. It was a very difficult task. The battle occurred in winter, and there were no tools that the Muslims had to dig the ground, so everything had to be done by hand. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam appointed Zayd bin Haritha as the leader of Muhajirin, and Sa'ad bin Ubaid as the leader of Ansar. And people are divided into teams and assigned a patch of land to dig up the trench. Now, Salman al-Farsi was an immigrant from Persia, so he neither belonged to Muhajirin nor Ansar. And because he was the expert mastermind behind this approach, both Muhajirin and Ansar wanted to include him in their own teams. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw a dispute arising, so he solved it by announcing Salmanu minna Ahlul Bayt, that Salman is from the Ahlul Bayt, meaning the family of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So in the end, Salman al-Farsi made a team by having some people from Muhajirin and Ansar with him, and he began digging. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself was helping the Sahaba in digging. So this is where he showed his leadership by example, by involving not only in the strategy of the battle, but doing the work by hand himself. And while he was digging, he was making this dua at the same time. Al-Bara bin Azib in Bukhari, he says, رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوم الخندق ينقل معنا التراب وهو يقول والله لولا الله ما هديتنا ولا صمنا ولا صلينا فأنزلنا سكينة علينا وثبت الأقدام إن لاقينا والمشركون قد بغوا علينا إذا أرادوا فتنة أبينا. Al-Bara bin Azib says, I saw the Prophet ﷺ on the day of the Battle of Khandaq, carrying earth with us and saying, by Allah, without Allah, we would not have been guided, neither would we have fasted, nor we would have prayed. O Allah, send down sakina, calmness upon us, and make our feet firm when we meet the enemy. the pagans have rebelled against us, but if they want to put us in affliction, we refuse to flee. So the trench was completed in 6 days, and Muslims were then prepared to face off with the enemies. But as the Muslims got ready, one internal issue arose. The Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza, who resided in a fortress southeast of Medina, they had a peace treaty with Muslims that they will neither participate in support of Muslims nor against them. But then Banu Qurayza broke their pledge and they decided to side with the disbelievers. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam sent a delegate with Sa'ad bin Mu'adh and Sa'ad bin Ubaidah to assess the situation, and they both confirmed that the treaty has been breached. Then one more situation happened. The hypocrites in Medina started to back out. Some of them openly opposed Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, while others made excuses and left the battlefield. So the battle started as armies lined up on both sides. There were arrows shot every day, but no conclusion was in sight, even after a month. And then there was one particular day, the battle became so intense that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and companions had to remain engaged in fight throughout the day and did not even get a chance to pray until Isha. So they missed 4 of their prayers that day. Finally, as things became unbearable for Muslims, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam prayed against the disbelievers for 3 consecutive days. And then Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala sent a cold wind, a storm that uprooted tents of armies, and they had to run away and announce retreat. He also sent angels to put fear in the hearts of disbelievers, and they understood that the only way to protect themselves from this situation is to run away. So that was the background of Battle of the Ahzab. So with that, let's continue with the tafsir. إذ جاءوكم من فوقكم ومن أسفل منكم وإذ زاغت الأبصار وبلغت القلوب الحناجر وتظنون بالله الظنونا. Remember when they came at you from above you and from below you, and when the eyes shifted in fear and the hearts reached the throats, and you assumed about Allah various assumptions. هنالك ابتلي المؤمنون وزلزلوا زلزالا شديدا. There the believers were tested and shaken with a severe shaking. Min fawqikum means from above, and refers to the Meccan armies that came to attack from the northern side of Medina. And ومن asfala means from below, and it's referring to Banu Qurayza, who had a fortress in the southern part of Medina. Zaghat al-absar means shakhasat al-absar, hayratan wa dahshatan, the bewildering of the eyes in sheer confusion and amazement. Wa balaghat al-qulub al-hanajira means nihayat al-halaqim, tamthil li-shiddat al-khawf, that hearts reach the end of the throat, and this is a way to signify the intensity of fear that Muslims had during the battle. So due to the size of this army, which was close to 12 to 15,000 compared to merely 3,000 Muslims in Medina, there were obviously concerns. Hypocrites thought that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and companions will be eliminated this time. And most believers were certain that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala will cause His religion to prevail, but there were some who began to doubt their chance of winning this war. And if you take a moment and reflect, it's a very natural response that Sahaba had. Think about a situation in your own life. You may recall many times when you got really stranded, but Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala found a way out for you. But when you find yourself in your next great challenge, you sometimes start wondering, will I really be able to come out of this? You know, when you are in that state of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has taught us a dua to deal with that situation, which is what he taught to a Sahabi during the Battle of Ahzab. Allahumma astur awratina wa amir ru'atina. Oh Allah, cover our weak points and calm our fears. So that was the state of believers at that point because of the intensity of the war many of them were still firm in their belief, but there were some who were concerned as to what will happen next. And definitely hypocrites were using this as an opportunity to flee the situation altogether. So let's review verses 9 to 11. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent angels and strong winds to make believers victorious in the battle of the trench. And one should maintain complete trust over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even when physical means of his help are not apparent. Stop here, inshallah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم